Hi, everyone. My name is Shelley Reed, and welcome to today's webinar on accessibility. My name is Shelley. As I said before, I use she, her pronouns. I am a middle-aged white woman with brown hair and glasses, and today I'm wearing a gray sweater vest over a blue t-shirt. And we have Bailey here to give her expertise on accessibility, and I'm going to turn it over to Bailey now.
Thank you so much, Shelley. I really appreciate you having me here today. So my name is Bailey Goldenbaum. My pronouns are they, them. I am a 36-year-old person who has long brown hair and a green top on. And I'm really excited to be here. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, great. So as we move along today, I just want everybody to know that how this is going to be set up is that there will be a lot of slides that are up on the screen, but at the very same time, we're going to be doing some polls and some questionnaires. And so please feel free to, input any of the answers that you would like to. There is no pressure, but what I have learned over time as a teacher is that there is a lot of learning that comes along with doing. So let's get started. So again, here's the introduction, or excuse me, here's the agenda for today. And so we have an introduction, top accessibility issues that I believe are the most important that you should be going over, identifying those issues, and then we're going to come as a group to fix a page that is inaccessible. And then the last piece is I'm going to be sharing some resources and we'll do some Q&A. And then just again, if you'd like to, please feel free to put any questions in the chat. I had mentioned to Shelley before that if there's anything that is really needs to be answered immediately that I had not been able to answer within that context, we'll do the question out loud, but otherwise we'll be sharing mostly at the end. Okay. So accessibility, what is it and how are we going to kind of approach it from this lens of ensuring access to justice? So just so you know, I am the UX UI designer at A2J Tech. And at A2J Tech, we focus on building technology that improves access to legal services for all people, especially those with disabilities. And so digital accessibility is about ensuring that your online content is usable by everyone, regardless of their abilities or how they interact with the content. So you'll see here we have web accessibility there are three main points as to why digital accessibility is important, is that it's number one, it's inclusive. So when websites are accessible, it ensures that everyone, regardless of disability, can access your content and services. Secondly, it's legally required. And then really it's the morally right thing to do. So beyond legal obligations, ensuring accessibility promotes equity as well as equality. Okay. And again, here's my introduction one more time. But I just wanted to say to you that I am also I am a teacher at Moore College of Art and Design. So besides being the UX UI designer at A2J Tech, I have 8 years of experience in the education sector, and I teach educators how to teach English language learners through the lens of art education. So right after this, I actually go to Moore and I'll be teaching this evening. So the first thing that we're going to do is this survey, just to get an idea as to what's going on here. How familiar are you with web accessibility? This will give me an idea as to how it best describes you and gives us just an idea as to how I'm working with you today. So you'll see it's coming up right now. I'm completely unfamiliar with web accessibility, heard about it before, but don't know how to identify issues or how to fix. I know how to identify some accessibility issues. I've fixed an accessibility issue before. And I see that we're actually going to be going through all three. So what is your role, whether that's a web designer, lawyer, staff for a legal services organization, or maybe you work in technology. And then the last piece is, what are you hoping to learn about in this session? So how to identify accessibility issues, how to fix accessibility issues, and then how can A2J Tech help my organization with accessibility issues? Maybe all of the above. We'll let people, oh, I think we are almost there. And this is great. So I see a good majority of folks know how to identify some accessibility issues, but maybe they need a little bit more information. A lot of folks here are staff for legal services organizations, and ultimately you're hoping to learn all of the above, which is great. Excellent. So let's get it going. Here are some of the top accessibility issues. So now let's get into the core of the content. The most common accessibility issue that we have, even if they're small or easy to be overlooked at errors, they're going to have an impact on the user experience. So particularly for people using assistive technologies like screen readers, we're going to need to focus on 4 key areas that tend to cause most of the problems on legal services websites. So we have heading levels, meaningful links, color contrast, and alternative text. So these, again, are 4 of the most common, easily fixable accessibility issues. And not only is it that you can have these fixed on your legal services websites, but when you're thinking about even your documentation, so within Microsoft Word, and that can absolutely be a whole other session, but there are heading levels, meaningful links, color contrast, and alternative text that is within Microsoft Word and within documentation itself. So the first thing that we have here is headings. So headings aren't just about making text look bigger or bolder. They're really crucial for organizing content. So headings should follow a logical order that reflects the structure of your page. So you have this H1, which is the main heading. Usually H1, there's usually one H1 on your screen, or excuse me, on your website. Then you move down into these subheading levels and then these subheading levels as well. And so you're moving down this kind of structure, but think about this. You're not going to use headings just to change the size or the style of the text. So not everything is going to need to be a heading. So think about them as more so as a guide for both users and screen readers to navigate through the information. So if they're using a screen reader like NVDA or JAWS, they might hit the H button so that they're kind of skipping through finding the heading levels so that they can easily get to that information 1, 2, 3. And this is a great example of good heading levels. And sometimes it can be, I use the site a lot just because they have some really great ways to look at their at what they've done to make sure that their site is accessible. And so you'll see here you have the welcome to gov.uk, that is their H1. Then as we move down, we have here the H1, then the H2 is here. Moving even further down is the H3. Okay. Then we have meaningful links. So when writing link text, it's super important that users know how exactly what they're going to be doing when they're clicking a link. So it's very easy for all of us to say, all right, I'm just going to put in the URL, www.example.com. But really, when a screen reader is reading that out loud, and especially if it's this very long URL, it's just going to keep going and keep going. So we don't want that to be happening. You'll see on the page to the left here, Here's not necessarily the best example. So to learn more about a website usability, click here. Okay, so we don't want to do that. We want to describe what is happening when we click on this link. Check out our latest blog post on website usability, which makes it much, much better for the screen reader. You'll see that not only does it have to be that you're describing the purpose or the destination, but underlining links is going to be very helpful. And as you are maintaining your website and maintaining even documentation itself, you should go back in and make sure that those sites are live or they're functioning. Just because what's going to end up happening is that you'll have a dead link and then nobody can go anywhere. And you also, depending on the type of thing that you are doing, it's always good practice to make sure that your links are going out to in a new tab, especially if somebody needs to be going back to your website and wants to navigate that website more. Okay, once again, we have not accessible. We're seeing, please find a security questionnaire here, link, this. This is much better. Please find a security questionnaire, fill out a new equipment request, etc. Okay, moving forward to color contrast. So color contrast is referring to the difference in brightness between the foreground, so like text, and the background. And having good color contrast is going to ensure that text is legible, even for folks with visual impairments. And so the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, so that's WCAG, recommends that there is a contrast ratio of 4.5 to 1 for normal text. So this means that the text needs to be at least 4.5 times brighter or darker than the background to be readable. So you have normal text, it's referring to anything less than 18 point in font size. And this ratio is stricter because smaller text is harder to read. And so you need more contrast in order for it to be legible. And so then you have 3 to 1 for larger text. So for larger text is anything above that 18 points or larger, and the contrast ratio is a little bit smaller, so 3 times to 1. So here you'll see on the screen, this is what I created for the A2J Tech brand guide. So these are different color combinations against their ratios. So this is going to be checked against the WCAG guidelines. I'm going to show you some really great resources and some add-ons that you can put onto your Chrome or onto Firefox that really is extremely helpful when you're trying to figure out the color contrast ratio between two colors. Here's a great image. So it's displaying 4 examples of foreground text color against background colors. So the only example you have on the far right is sufficient color contrast, right? So we have this kind of like gray, light gray, and then we have the slightly darker gray, but it still is insufficient. Once again, low color contrast here. And then we also have high contrast color combinations, making it easier to read. Okay, now we have alternative text. So alt text is the written description of images that screen readers read aloud for users who can't see the images. So the key to this is to be concise as well as descriptive. So you're not going to need to be so extremely descriptive that you are losing you're losing the user, but that it is expressive enough that you get an idea of what the image might be. So one thing that is very important is that you're not going to need to include phrases like "this is an image of," "this is a picture of," that we don't need. You might even say here, so we have a great example here that says tourists pose for pictures while touching the foot of the John Harvard statue. Great. That is quite enough, especially if we have a broken image link here. At least if there is a broken image link, then you'll have the description here ready and set to go. So again, you might even be working on, let's say, social media, in those advanced settings. Make sure that you're including the alt text. That's very important on every single page of your website. It's really important to include alt text. There are some key differences, so you might not need to include alt text for every single thing. So one of the reasons that you might not need alt text is that you might have decorative images. Those don't need alt text. And you have to kind of think about this idea of, does it convey specific information? So maybe you have, let's say you have an image of, I'm trying to think of like a really good description. Maybe you have an icon that it doesn't necessarily need to be explained out loud with a screen reader, because some of that information is in text underneath. So that can be tagged as just a decorative. Here's another example. So these are examples of 3 alternative texts describing a photo of a man wearing a helmet riding a bike, right? So the first one up top, it's saying man wearing a helmet riding a bike. Okay, let's move down. Bicycle, not enough information. Image of someone riding a bicycle, not enough. And also, again, what do we see here? We see that it's saying image. We don't need image there. Okay. Let's move this forward. So where do we start? And for those of you that do have information about how to, or have used WCAG guidelines or standards, amazing. This is extremely, extremely helpful. So the WCAG guidelines are these international standards for web accessibility, and they provide guidelines for making websites accessible to people with disabilities. And something that I thought was really interesting that I found today on LinkedIn, which was interestingly enough, is that, let me just stop sharing for a moment and I'll bring it back. But there was a great thing that someone had created, which was this. Okay. All right, so these are the how to meet the WCAG guidelines. And as you look through, you're like, whoa, there is so much information here. I don't even know how to get through all of this. I'm going to share this with everyone, but I'm a visual learner. And for me to understand how things, how the guidelines or the standards link up, there is this WCAG 2.2 map, and this is by theme. So it's by not only theme level, but you have level A, level double A, as well as triple A. The closer that you're getting to triple A standards, the most accessible that it can be. So I will share this just so that you have an idea. It almost looks like a train map, which helps me to understand what is going on here. Okay. Let's get back into it. So how do you begin an evaluation? So you have these accessibility tools. So WAVE is this online tool that highlights accessibility issues on web pages. Stark accessibility checker. I use this a lot more specifically to the color contrast checker. They have so many different types of areas of this extension that you can address compliance issues. Then you have the browser extension Axe, and Axe is used by experts. And even for myself, I think that there are times where Axe can be a little bit complex for me, but I think it's important to use Axe to get the most detailed information that you need for accessibility evaluations. And remember, one other thing is that these tools are not going to be perfect. You should still use, you should still conduct manual checks on your own. As I said here, no tool is perfect. When would a tool potentially miss a key accessibility issue? So we have low color contrast, may not get flagged when using a background image. Poor alt text will not get flagged as missing. Miscategorized alt text will also not get flagged, and then poorly formatted links may not get flagged as well. Okay. All right, so let's have a little bit of fun here. What I'm going to do, and let me just stop sharing for a moment. I'm going to go into the chat and I'm going to have everybody open up this web page on your own browser window. Okay. Okay, great. So once you have that open, we're going to answer some questions about what you've learned so far. So let's look at this together. And what I will go through is, give me just one second. Screen. Okay, so everybody should be able to open this up. This is a practice page. This is actually what we, this is purposefully an inaccessible site, but we do have an accessibility service area at go8jtech.com, so check that out afterwards for more information. But so this page is going to be incorrect. What we want you to do is look through this, take a moment, and just by you going through, we want you to consider what areas you're noticing through what I have mentioned before might be inaccessible. So take that time to go through this, see what you're noticing. Okay. So we have the first couple questions. And this one is, given what you've learned so far, which of the following errors can you identify without having to use a tool or seeing code? Moving through, the alt text for the illustration at the top of the screen is accessibility. What should the alt text be instead? Then we have a bonus question, which I'll get to in just a moment. So if you could just do the first two questions that are within the poll, that would be great. And so when I'm talking about the alt text here for this is what I'm speaking to for where it's saying alt text is accessibility. And I'll just scroll through for the people who maybe don't have it open. Okay, I'll read the first one out loud again to you. So given what you've learned so far, which of the following errors can you identify without having to use a tool or seeing code? And the answers that we have to choose from are heading levels, meaningful links, color contrast, or alt text. The alt text for illustration at the top of the screen currently reads accessibility. What should the alt text be instead? Okay. And as people are going through and answering this question, I'm going to open up the wave evaluation tool. And so you'll see here, it is on the left-hand side, we have a summary of what is happening on this page. And what's great about it is that we have some details as to what is going on. We're looking at the ordering, we're looking at the structure, and then you can also test some of the contrasts that you see here. Okay, so I'm just going to look at what people have written. And okay, people have been paying attention. So meaningful links is the correct answer. So what we see here for given what you've learned so far, which of the following errors can you identify? Yeah, right here. So the source link, this is going to be reading all of this information out loud through the screen reader, and that can be very annoying. Now, let's move into the next question. So the next question is what should be the alt text instead? And actually, the alt text should be null or empty. So this should be decorative, because what we have here is this is a very decorative piece that we don't need to have it describe. This describes it well enough that this can be decorative. And then the last question, I don't know if we're sharing this with everybody, but the last question actually is, did the Wave tool find all of the errors on this page? And so we do have the good majority of folks here saying no. I would love to know if anybody wanted to answer this question. You're more than welcome to answer it in the chat, or you can unmute. I would love to hear what you have to say. And no pressure at all. We could also just move this forward if need be. All right. So what I will say is that the contrast errors, says we have 2 contrast errors. Okay, good point. We see this here. I think most people can identify we have a contrast error here. But what we're seeing here is that this is also going to be a contrast error. We have the pink, and then we have this kind of darker pink behind it, as well as this gradient. Either way, this will likely be, this won't have great color contrast. This is the Stark accessibility checker. Let's do this tool. Maybe we try something here in the middle. And then let's try to grab this. And there we go. So we're seeing that it might be good for large text, but the normal text that we see here, it's inaccessible. And that's not great. But if you are using the Wave evaluation tool as you move along, you'll see that we are looking for that H1 here, not seeing that. This should be an H1. This is a heading level 3. Heading level 4 probably would have been an H2. Also, this is a very complicated text. The inherent entitlement to avail oneself of internet-based legal services, that's actually a little crazy, I think, to include this here on a website. What we need to think about is plain language. So any way that you can make your language on your website accessible for those who have reading writing levels at 6th grade reading level to around 8th grade reading level would be extremely, extremely helpful. Then we move down. Let's see what else we have here. H2, this likely would have been an H4. And then if you click into here, the greatest part about it is that you have these details, and then you can reference any of this information, and it should be able to explain it to you. So there might be suspicious links text. What does this mean? Link text contains extraneous text or may not make sense out of context, et cetera, et cetera. Great part about it too is that you have these standards and guidelines, and let's say that you have to, with your organization, potentially you have a grant, and then you're having to explain within the report what standards you've hit. This is a great way to be able to kind of meet that compliance piece. Okay. Great. Let's move on to the resources. These are the tips and tricks to make your digital platform more accessible. Again, we have these guidelines. WebAIM is a nonprofit organization that provides training, resources, and consulting for web accessibility. Great information here. We also have WebAIM. It's a great resource for training and consulting on accessibility. We have the Ally Project is a community-driven effort to make web accessibility easier for everyone. So much information, including the guidelines, articles, etc. And then we have our own A2J accessibility guide, and this is specific for legal services organizations. And please feel free to check those out. We actually have a short guide on how to make your legalese less complex. So it's going to make life a little bit easier for you as you're putting together your resources on your websites. And if for some reason after this meeting, this webinar, that you need some help, we do have our own accessibility services. Here is my email at the very bottom. So this is bailey@go2jtech.com. We do have, we conduct accessibility audits on your website, provide remediation recommendations, and then we're offering ongoing maintenance if need be. So now that that is complete, I would love to open it up to questions and answers. If anybody has any questions regarding what we had seen here, or if there's any questions that weren't addressed today.
I just wanted to say that was very helpful, Bailey. I definitely picked up several things that I want to look into more. And with our website design going on right now, it is certainly timely for us.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of you can make your website way as accessible as you would like it to be. I think one of the biggest things that you want to do is at least allow yourself to go through the wave evaluation tool, see what's going on with your site, manually check it, absolutely do that. There's also, we're working on document accessibility right now, and I'm doing a lot of learning within that area, but really look through those documents as well. It's so important to make sure that, your tables are set up well, maybe even kind of use less tables, which is a huge thing as well, because but regular text or plain text is exactly what you're going to need. Body text, anything that can be read out loud with headers is extremely important.
So we do have a question in the chat, and the question is, does Wave check just the page it's looking at, such that you would have to check each page separately, or is it looking at the whole website?
Great question. So it is checking just that page. So you'll have to go into each page in order to check that.
And the second question is, how frequently should an organization plan to conduct manual testing? And is that with native screen readers, or can sighted person with a screen reader conduct manual testing?
Fantastic question. So in terms of frequency, I think it depends on how often, or I would say the first time that you're making that evaluation of your website, and you've made those changes already, I would say it depends, right? So there's a website called Dr. Link Checker, and that we've signed up for, which it's fantastic. So I'll get a weekly report of any dead or broken links, anything that's being sent to a 404 page. That is something that can be going on in the background, so you're not having to manually check every single time. What I would be doing is signing up for different newsletters, trying to figure out if standards have changed, looking at WCAG guidelines. But if you've already done a major amount of testing and fixing on your website, I think that it's just that I would say maybe every couple months to do those checks. And then I think you had a second part of your question, and is that with a native screen reader or can a sighted person? So I think what we have done in the past is we have done testing with users who are using screen readers. And I think that is big. I think it also allows for people who are who might, do that as a profession, and that's something that you might want to kind of budget for, but it's ultimately going to give you a big, it's going to be doing the right thing, I think, as helping others out. You can do, if you feel as though you're very good at using a screen reader, I do think that that's important to do. But there are some complexities on the back end that you do have to consider that are not just, I'm going to open up a screen reader like NVDA and see if that is working. There's actually like deeper back end pieces that will also need to be checked out. So how do you feel about UserWay and accessibility menu widget? I personally, I don't think that I would like to use UserWay. This has been a topic of conversation for a lot of different people. I don't personally think it's important to, or not important, excuse me, that's not the right thing to say. I personally don't think it is helpful. I think that making your site accessible is number one. It's kind of like a Band-Aid using UserWay. We actually did an event, an accessibility event, and had spoken to a lawyer who uses a screen reader and had mentioned that it is really hard to use the accessibility menu widget. It doesn't get everything right. And so that's why we keep saying doing the manual work is actually way more helpful. Another thing to speak to is CAPTCHAs. CAPTCHAs are really hard for screen readers. So make sure that if you're putting that on your site, that you're taking that into consideration. These are excellent questions.
I had a question about audio accessibility. So if a site has videos or anything like that, what are maybe some best practices for closed captioning or transcripts?
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah, definitely. So I would say if you're embedding video into your site, if there is a way, depending on, if you're using YouTube, if you're, connecting to like a Loom video, if you're able to set up those back end, pieces where you can have closed captioning come up automatically, I would definitely say that's important to do. One other thing that I think is also important is if you are going to be putting that video within a modal, let's say like a pop-up, modals also have to be accessible. So let's say you're clicking on a link to a YouTube video. The link pops up and the modal is right there. That modal will, and the reason why I say this is because modals will read behind, I said modals read. Screen readers will read behind the modal itself, and then at the very end, get to that video. So although that doesn't specifically answer your question about the audio piece, I just think that's important to keep in the back of your mind, because somebody needs to be able to get to that video and be able to listen to it.
Yeah, that's interesting. That actually brings up a point that I was thinking of as you were explaining. So with as far as embedding videos, is it better to have it, like you mentioned, actually pop up, or would it be easier to have it as like a link that you put that kind of describes, like if you click this, it will take you to this video?
Yeah, I think it depends on the situation. I would say linking out is probably the best practice in this case. You can embed, but I would say linking out is totally fine as well, as long as it is going into a new tab.
Thank you.
No problem.
So Bailey, for those of us who may not be familiar with the terminology, can you explain what a
Sure.
modal is?
Yes. Let me do that for you right now. And I apologize for those who need a little more context. Okay. So let's do, actually, this is not for, For promotion purposes, I promise this. This is just what was on my screen right now, but we have our Texas kiosks that we work with. And so I was just thinking about this, but if we are clicking on these links down here, and I click this piece right here is the modal. So what would happen is the screen reader needs to be reading just this area here. Then in the background, this would essentially be turned off so that this could be read out loud. Again, you'll see it here. This is embedded, and that's totally fine as well.
Awesome. So then we have another question. How would you suggest dealing with CAPTCHAs?
Yeah, so I don't have quite the best answers for that. From what I have learned, especially from that session, is that there needs to be a big like universal change with CAPTCHAs. So will you continue to use it? Yes. Are there ways that people are making it easier? So there might be, for the CAPTCHAs, having this read aloud, there's an option where you can have it read out loud to you. So whether that's, you'll see those numbers that maybe are kind of skewed a little bit too much and you really can't see it. So there is an option there for it to be read out loud. And then you can kind of put that in the what you need to put in for it to work. So I would need to follow up with you again for how that would be fixed, but it is a universal problem that needs to be fixed.
I'm wondering how you recommend putting documents on a website. What is the best way? Should they be, say, a Word document, or is it better to have a PDF that's been OCR'd? What is the standard?
Yeah. So for A2J Tech, what we do is we have two different ways of doing this, depending on if you have, let's say you do have Adobe Acrobat and you have background in making your PDFs accessible, absolutely do that. That's great. We happen to use Canva a lot. And with Canva, you unfortunately, they aren't always the most accessible PDFs, and there aren't many options to make that piece accessible within Canva. So you are manually putting that into Adobe Acrobat and making those changes. But one of the best things that you can do is make a Word document that literally is just very, plain style with your H1 header, your H2, your body text all in place from Microsoft Word. Download it as a document, and then you link that within your site. You can have two different links as well if need be. So that might change the structure of your site, but I really do believe that having kind of like erring on the side of caution is the best case scenario. So if you have, let's say you have a form that, or even just a guide that isn't accessible, somebody can't just go there and say, hey, why can't I read this? You have that backup. So whether you're doing it in Adobe Acrobat or you're making two different versions, it's really up to you.
And Sarah has said that we tend to use Vengage over Canva because of their accessibility tools that are built into the design platform.
Oh, that's
Good to know.
fantastic. Yeah, thank you for that, Sarah. That's super helpful.
So
And also, I was just going to say, sorry, there's also Adobe, I think InDesign that you can use as well. But again, if you're not like this big Adobe person that really knows all the ins and outs, don't make yourself go crazy over it.
if you do use software like Canva, are there any best practices for kind of making sure that as you're designing, you're not breaking a bunch of accessibility
Yeah.
guidelines?
Yeah, so in Canva, I think that I haven't worked in Canva in a bit, but I think there has been the integration of heading levels. I think there's also the integration of alt text. And I'm not entirely sure. So those two I'm 100% or almost 100% about. But yeah, I think that you'll kind of have to consider and maybe even go into Canva and see what their accessibility statement is and then what tools they also have. One other big piece that I would like to bring up is if some of these tools that you do use don't have the accessibility options that you might need, it's important to reach out to them and say, hey, I need to know what your accessibility options are so that I can make my site, work for those who use screen readers, or even if you have like a learning management system that you're using, I would say, ask them, find out what's going on, and maybe they'll actually develop a tool that'll make it much easier for those folks.
Thank you.
So there's a question, does anyone have a place on your site for users with disabilities to report errors or issues?
Great question. So I think within our site, I didn't develop this site, but I'm almost certain we do have an area for feedback. And so sometimes I think we use fill out for hours. And if that's the case and we're using a survey tool, the tool itself should be accessible. And if it's not, then again, reaching out to someone like fill out to make sure that that is accessible. But I think, yeah, having a place for anyone to report that is a great idea. It's important for anyone to use that.
And Hannah has shared that Canva now has the option to add alt text and a way to tag elements as decorative and designate
Great.
heading levels, and it makes it easier to remediate the PDF on the back end. So that's awesome.
Excellent. Thank you, Hannah. I appreciate that.
I had one more question about like what an accessibility audit would entail, kind of how you could get started if that's something you wanted to do with your site.
So essentially all of the things that you have seen on the slides itself, I would say start with that. So you have the heading levels, you have the meaningful links, et cetera, et cetera. Those 4 different pieces, again, you can do manually, but as things kind of get deeper and you learn more about accessibility, you might want to reach out to others that might be more specifically looking at the way that your back end is working and how accessible it can be. I use Webflow. So Webflow does a lot of great things where it'll tell you there's an error somewhere, whether that is that there needs to be alt text or there's a color contrast issue. But one other thing is that you can reach out to organizations that we have worked with. So we have Nobility is a great organization. Taman Inc. is also an awesome organization to reach out to. They do document accessibility, and I'm sure other practices as well. But yeah, I think you really have to start off small and then make your way and bigger. But download those extensions, download the Wave app, downloads what's the other one that I was thinking about? Stark, excuse me. So download Stark as well. Axe evaluation tool, great one as well to use.
So thank you.
No problem. Great. Fantastic questions. And also if you have any other questions that you need to have answered and maybe I didn't answer them fully, I need a little bit of time to do some research, please feel free to reach back out to me. And I'll put my email address in the chat. And then after this, I think Shelley will be sending, or you'll put it into the notes or something. I forgot what you had
Yes,
said. I'm
we
sorry
will
for the
create a
links.
web page that will have all of the resources available, and we will try to make sure that we take our learning from today. And I think it's really important to remember that accessibility isn't just for people who have visual impairments or other things like that. Really, accessibility is helpful for everyone. So it's not, you're not reaching just a small audience, right? I mean, I use closed captioning on videos all the time because trying not to keep family awake while I'm watching videos, or, there's just so many things that maybe were developed for special purposes that we all benefit from today, that we just don't even think about having been created for a certain audience.
Absolutely. Yeah, Shelley, thank you so much for bringing that up. It can get lost. And I think what you can do is take the time to consider what are the things that you need as somebody who's using everyday items, and how can you empathize with those users who also have those needs. One other thing that I wanted to mention is that there is this great extension called Helper Bird that we've put onto the kiosks. And so there's a lot of room for you can use it on a website. So it has various reading options. It allows you to extract text. You can have different colors of the screen. So it's almost, that is an overlay in itself to help people who might need more more help navigating. So you have dyslexia reading tools, text to speech. I would just say check that one out. It's for a lot of different folks. And then another thing that we've done for the kiosks is we've actually tried to use some free hardware. So there is Camera Mouse, which was developed by university. And so it's allowing people who need to navigate a site to just use their head, whether you're somebody who is quadriplegic or cannot, use your hands to navigate a keyboard or a mouse. There are just tools out there, but one of the hardest things to kind of grapple with is that the tools that are out there that aren't free are extremely expensive. And I would just say that if you are a legal aid organization that's doing your very best and you're trying to get grants and you're doing what you can, try to find some alternatives out there that are free. Go to, and I think you need to go to the places that have that are going to be safe, and you're making sure that your back end is safe. Of course, go to your IT, say, hey, is this something that we can apply to our site? Go for it. Please see if those things will work. Sometimes I go onto Reddit. Sometimes I'll just scour the internet to say, hey, what's out there? You never know. You just never know. And a lot of universities are developing things, and some of them are prototypes. Some of them will be out there in the next couple of months, and you try them out.
I think you have just identified our next crowdsourced resource. So that'll be a database that we start you know, trying to identify things. So
Great.
watch for that in the future. I think that'll be a fun one to share.
Excellent. Thank you.
Well, we obviously don't want to take time from your day if you don't have questions. Bailey is here, so we certainly want to encourage you to take advantage of her knowledge. But if no one has questions, we'll let everyone get back to their day. So I'm going to pause here. Actually, let's close the session, and then we can have some time without recording if people have questions that maybe they don't want to have recorded. So thank you so much for coming. This will end the recording, and we'll have some unrecorded time.